Pay close attention. What I'm about to share with you is unlike anything else. No one in my family believes it happened, and I've given up trying to convince them. They said I was making it up when I mentioned it. Or was I? Was it all a figment of my imagination? Was I being gaslit? If you believe me after hearing this, or if you've had a similar experience, please let me know. Otherwise, I might just lose my mind. It all happened when I was 18. I was finally leaving home for college, and I was excited. I had been there all my life, but it wasn't entirely a happy moment. I was going to miss home, especially Grandpa Jose. Grandpa Jose was kind of my best friend. I know it's strange that a 90-year-old was my best friend, but it'll all make sense if you listen closely, I promise. I was the youngest of my siblings. Mom and Dad had me pretty late. My siblings were never really around. They had their own lives, jobs, and families to build. So, I used to visit Grandpa Jose every day after school at the mental institution. He hadn't uttered a word in 60 years. All he did was stare at the wall and smile a little whenever he saw me coming. I'd go there to tell him about my day, read him an article or a story, watch movies with him, anything to pass the time. I was an awkward kid, so I never really had friends my age, and there was no one to talk to at home. So, it was either being home, alone after school, or spending time with my grandpa. And although he never said a word, or even flinched, it was still better than being by myself. But everything changed the day I got my college acceptance letter and broke the news to him. "Congratulations," he said hoarsely. I froze. Grandpa Jose had just broken his 60-year silence. I looked around, wondering if anyone else had witnessed what just happened. But it was just the two of us in his room. "You can talk?" I asked, stepping back like I had just seen a ghost. He reached out to me, almost as if he was trying to tell me to keep quiet. I sat back down, heart pounding, and immediately asked, "Why have you stayed silent all this time?" He looked at me, his expression heavy with something I couldn't yet name. Then he said, "I couldn't bear the pain." I was confused. What pain? How bad could it have been? After a few moments of tense silence, he began to speak. His eyes filled with horror, as if he was reliving the most terrifying moment of his life. And after what he told me, I understood why. Grandpa told me this story decades ago, and the details are a bit fuzzy, but here it goes. It was the 17th of March, 1925. Grandpa Jose said he had just gotten into a big fight with Grandma. She didn't want him to go to Michigan's Electric Forest Festival. There was a lot of drinking, partying, and substances involved. They had a child now, and Grandpa had a history with drugs. She didn't think it was safe, but he wanted to go anyway. His best friends, Tony and Esther, were going to be there, and he didn't want to miss out on a good time with his pals. So after storming out of the house, he headed to the airport, ready to have the time of his life. Music, freedom, escape. And honestly, that fight with Grandma couldn't have come at a better time. At least, that's how he saw it. He arrived in Michigan and met up with his friends at the airport. As expected, they were thrilled to see him. But there was someone else with them, a face he didn't recognize. Sensing his curiosity, Esther quickly stepped in. "This is Sherry," she said, smiling. "My best friend." Grandpa said Sherry looked a lot like Grandma. And in that moment, a wave of sadness washed over him. He realized just how wrong it felt, fighting with the woman he loved, just so he could chase a night of fun. But before he could dwell on that sadness, Tony pointed out something strange. The atmosphere felt off. Heavy clouds churned overhead, swirling in unnatural patterns like a warning that something bad was coming. Still, caught up in the excitement for the festival ahead, they brushed it off. The next day marked the second and most anticipated day of the festival. It was the peak of the event. People from all over the country had gathered to escape the routines of life, to lose themselves in the pulse of sound and light. They were there to have the time of their lives. As the music grew louder and the crowd more electric, Tony nudged Grandpa Jose and pointed to the sky. It looked like rain was coming. The air turned colder. The atmosphere darkened. The wind picked up, sharper, heavier. He spotted Esther and Sherry running toward him, clutching their hats so they wouldn't be snatched away by the wind. They tried to communicate, but the music was too loud, the energy too wild. Whatever they were trying to say was lost in the noise. But then, everything changed. The sirens screamed. Emergency alerts lit up phones like fireflies in the dark. The F5 had reached Michigan. Panic eclipsed the music. Chaos erupted. People scrambled, shoving through the crowd, desperately searching for cover. The same festival that once brought unity and peace had become a blood-soaked battlefield of desperation. Civility shattered. People turned on each other, survival blurred into savagery. Grandpa Jose said he tried to take charge of their little group, to protect them. They all held on to each other, forming a human chain against the chaos. He begged strangers for help, pulling friends through the screaming crowds, but fear was louder than reason. Then it happened. A huge man, easily 300 pounds, slammed into Sherry, breaking their chain. She fell hard, her face hitting the ground with a sickening thud. As he tried to run back to help her, a stampede of people trampled upon her. He remembered hearing Sherry let out a dying scream of pain. He tried to follow her voice, pushing through the unrelenting crowd, but he couldn't reach her. For a split second, he caught a glimpse of her. Her skull looked crushed, her face unrecognizable, as if 1,000 feet had trampled it into the earth. He froze. Nausea, guilt, horror, it all hit at once. And then she was gone, swallowed by the chaos. Within seconds, her voice was gone. What began as escape became entrapment in a living nightmare. All he could hear was the roar of panic, the screams of strangers. That's when he knew something terrible had happened to her. Esther was hysterical, crying out at the top of her lungs, terrified of what might have happened to her best friend. Tony and Grandpa Jose did everything they could to hold her back, to keep the group together and get them to safety. But she slipped right out of their grip. She bolted into the chaos, racing toward the spot where Sherry had last fallen. Jose reached for her, but it was too late. She disappeared into the crowd. Tony took off after Esther, and Grandpa Jose chased after them both. I remember him shedding tears as he recounted this moment, his voice trembling under the weight of memory. But things were only about to get worse. The tornado was closing in. As he turned to run, he saw it, towering, monstrous, tear through the crowd. And then, in a flash, it swept Tony away. That was the moment he made the ultimate sacrifice. With fire in his heart and no thought for his own safety, Grandpa Jose turned to face the storm, driven by nothing but love and the desperate hope of saving the people who meant the most to him. Unfortunately, the storm was far too deadly. Grandpa Jose was flung backwards. He hit the ground hard, skidding across the mud and gravel, his body torn and bruised. And then, everything went black. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I was scared for my life." When he woke up, everything was still. No more music, no more lights, no screaming crowd, just silence. He was lying in a field of debris, flattened tents, torn flags, broken shoes scattered like forgotten memories. The sky was gray, ashen, lifeless. Emergency responders were just arriving, picking their way through what was left. He tried to stand, but the pain was unbearable. His body felt broken, inside and out. They took him to a nearby hospital, asked him questions, tried to piece together what had happened. But how could he explain it? How do you describe watching a storm swallow your best friend whole? How do you describe seeing a friend's skull crushed as if she was trampled upon by 100 elephants? He said every time he tried to speak, the words caught in his throat. What was he supposed to say? All he could think about was Grandma and Dad, his child. After weeks of treatment, Grandpa Jose was eventually brought back home. He never spoke again, not a single word. He didn't want to tell anyone what happened that day. Not until he told me. I sat there still in shock, realizing he had the ability to talk all along. He just didn't want to relive it. Didn't want to say it out loud and bring that horror back to life. He kept crying as he repeated again and again, "I couldn't save them. I couldn't save my friends." His voice growing louder with each repetition. Louder and louder. As I stepped back in worry, Grandpa Jose suddenly began having a seizure. My heart raced as I called out for help. The nurses rushed in, instructing me to step outside as they worked to calm him down. I dialed Dad, my hands trembling, and tried to explain what had just happened. That's when I saw them. Nurses leaving his room with sad, somber expressions on their faces. Grandpa Jose was gone. When Mom and Dad arrived, I tried to tell them everything that had happened. What Grandpa Jose said, what I saw, but they wouldn't listen. They didn't believe me. It's been 20 years now, and no one believes me still. Am I crazy? Has anyone else experienced something so terrifying, so impossible, that no one would ever believe it?